Imagine a land of giants. Not people, but mountains. The Andes Mountains. They are a jagged spine running down the side of South America. Here the air is thin. The peaks are sharp like teeth. They scrape the endless blue sky. This was the home of the Inca. A world of rock, wind and sun. A place where only the strong could survive. They called their kingdom Tawantinsuyu. It means the four regions together. It was more than just a name. It was a promise. This was a land of extremes. To the west, the dry Atacama Desert met the crashing waves of the Pacific Ocean. To the east, the steamy Amazon rainforest breathed a thick, green breath. The Incas learned to master this land. They were not just living in it. They were part of it. They understood its secrets. They knew the rhythms of the seasons, the paths of the stars, and the spirits that lived in the rocks and rivers. The Inca story begins in a small high valley, the Valley of Cusco. Legend says the first Incas came from a sacred cave, or maybe they rose from the waters of Lake Titicaca. The sun god, Inti, sent his son, Manco Capac, and his daughter, Mama Oclo. They carried a golden staff. Where the staff sank into the earth, that was their home. It sank into the ground at Cusco. The reality was probably harder. The early Incas were just one small tribe among many. They fought with their neighbors. They made alliances. They were tough mountain people. The great change came in the early 1400s. A new leader emerged. His name was Pachacuti. His name meant he who remakes the world, and he did. Under his command, the Inca armies marched out of Cusco. They were disciplined. They were organized. They went north, south, east and west. They conquered tribe after tribe. Pachacuti did not just conquer with weapons. He was smart. He offered other tribes a choice. Join the Inca Empire peacefully. Accept the sun god. Pay your taxes. In return, you will have peace. An empire this big needs to be connected. How do you control mountains and deserts? How do you move armies and goods? The Incas had an answer. They built roads, not just a few tracks. They built a massive network. The Capac-Nan, the Royal Road. It was an engineering masterpiece. It stretched for over 40,000 kilometers. It was the bloodstream of the empire. It connected the cold peaks of the Andes to the warm coastal plains. It ran through deep valleys and across high plateaus. It was a symbol of Inca power, a line drawn across the face of South America. These were not roads for wheels. The Incas had no wheeled vehicles. They had no horses. These roads were for walking, for llamas carrying goods, and for the runners. To cross the deep canyons and raging rivers, the Incas built incredible bridges. They were masters of fiber. They wove thick ropes from grass and other plants. These ropes were as thick as a man's body. And how did messages travel so fast? The Incas had a relay system. They used runners called chasquis. These were young, fit men. They could run very fast. A message could travel from one end of the empire to the other, over 240 kilometers a day. At the very top of Inca society was one man, the Sapa Inca. He was the emperor, but he was more than that. He was a god on earth, the son of Inti, the sun god. His word was law. He owned everything. He wore the finest clothes woven from vicuna wool. He drank from golden cups. He was carried on a golden litter. No one could look him directly in the eye. He was the center of the Inca universe. The empire was organized like a pyramid. Below the Sapa Inca were the nobles and his family. Then came the priests and the army commanders. Below them were the local leaders of conquered peoples, and at the bottom was everyone else. Most Incas were farmers. Life was hard work. They lived in small communities called islus. An islus was like a big extended family. Everyone worked together. They farmed the land together. They shared the food. There was no money in the Inca Empire, so how did people pay taxes? With their time. This system was called the mita. Every man had to work for the state for a part of the year. You might be sent to build a road, or a temple, or a fortress. They were experts at farming on the steep mountainsides. They built terraces like giant steps to create flat land for their crops. This stopped the rain from washing away the soil. It was a clever solution to a difficult problem. Religion was part of everything for the Inca. It was in the sky, the earth, and the water. It was not just for Sundays. It was for every day. The gods were everywhere. The most important god was Inti, the sun god. The Sapa Inca was his son. so the sun was linked to power and life itself. But there were many other gods. There was Viracocha, the creator god who made the world. The Incas believed they had to keep the gods happy. They offered food and drink to the gods. They offered beautiful cloth. They also offered animals like llamas, and sometimes in very important ceremonies they offered human lives. Gold was not money for the Incas. It was the sweat of the sun. Silver was the tears of the moon. These metals were sacred. They were holy. They belonged to the gods and the Sapa Inca. The temples were covered in gold. The most famous was the Coricancha, the Temple of the Sun in Cusco. Its walls were lined with sheets of pure gold. In the temple garden, everything was made of gold and silver. The Incas also had a deep respect for their ancestors. They believed that the dead were not truly gone. They mummified their great rulers. The mummies of the past Sapa Incas were treated like they were still alive. The Incas were master builders. Their skill with stone is still a mystery today. They built huge cities, temples, and fortresses. And you know, they did this without modern tools. They had no iron. They had no wheels. But somehow, they could cut massive stones so perfectly that they fit together without any mortar. You cannot even slide a piece of paper between the stones. This technique made their buildings very strong. The capital city was Cusco. It was the heart of the empire. The Incas believed it was the navel of the world. Cusco was a magnificent city. It was planned in the shape of a puma, a sacred animal. The city was filled with palaces and temples. The streets were narrow and paved with stone. Water ran through stone channels, bringing fresh water to the city. People from all over the empire lived in Cusco. But the most famous Inca site is one that was hidden from the world for centuries. Machu Picchu. It sits on a high ridge, surrounded by jungle-covered mountains. It is a city in the clouds. The location is breathtaking. It is a place of incredible beauty and peace. It shows the Incas' deep connection with nature. The buildings seem to grow out of the mountain itself. When the empire fell, the Spanish never found Machu Picchu. The Inca Empire was strong. It seemed like it would last forever. But in the 1520s, strange news arrived. Reports of pale men with hair on their faces. They came from the sea on huge wooden houses. They had strange animals that they rode like deer. And they had weapons that made a sound like thunder and spitfire. These were the Spanish conquistadors. They had already conquered other lands in the Americas. At this time, the Inca Empire was in trouble. The Sapa Inca, Huayna Capac, died suddenly. He died from a strange disease, a disease that the Europeans brought with them, smallpox. The Incas had no immunity to these new sicknesses. After the emperor died, a terrible civil war began. His two sons, Huascar and Atahualpa, both wanted to be the next Sapa Inca. The empire was split in two. Brother fought against brother. For 5 years, the war raged. It was a brutal and bloody conflict. It tore the empire apart. Cities were burned. Many thousands of warriors were killed. In the end, Atahualpa won the war, but the empire was deeply wounded, and it was at this exact moment of weakness that the Spanish arrived. A small group of Spanish soldiers, led by a man named Francisco Pizarro, marched into the weakened empire. He had fewer than 200 men. Atahualpa agreed to meet Pizarro in the main square of Cajamarca. He was not afraid. He was the Sapa Inca, a god on earth. What could a few hundred strangers do to him? He arrived on a magnificent golden litter. A Spanish priest came forward. He offered Atahualpa a Bible. He told him to accept the Christian God and the Spanish king. Atahualpa had never seen a book before. He held it to his ear. He heard nothing. He threw the book on the ground. This was the signal Pizarro was waiting for. He gave the order to attack. The cannons fired. The soldiers on horseback charged into the crowd. The sound and the sight were terrifying. The Inca warriors were shocked. In just a few hours, thousands of Incas were killed. Not a single Spanish soldier died. Pizarro's men captured Atahualpa. They pulled him from his golden litter. The god on earth was now a prisoner. Atahualpa tried to buy his freedom. He made an incredible offer. He promised to fill a large room once with gold and twice with silver. For months, gold and silver came from all over the empire. Atahualpa kept his promise, but Pizarro was a liar. He did not free Atahualpa. He was afraid. If Atahualpa was free, he could lead his army against the Spanish. So Pizarro put the emperor on trial and had him executed. The heart of the Inca Empire had stopped beating. The death of Atahualpa was not the end of the fight. The Incas fought back. For many years there was a fierce resistance, but the Spanish had superior weapons. The resistance was brave, but it was not enough. The Spanish slowly took control of the entire empire. They built their own cities on the ruins of the Inca ones. They built churches on top of the Inca temples. A new world was being built on top of the old one. The Spanish conquest was a disaster for the people of the Andes. The new diseases continued to kill millions. The old way of life was destroyed. Their religion was suppressed. Their sacred objects were melted down. The great empire of Tawantinsuyu, the land of the four regions, was gone. It had risen like a meteor, burned brightly for a century, and then vanished just as quickly. A tragic end to a magnificent story of human achievement. But the Inca did not completely disappear. Their spirit lives on. It lives on in the people of the Andes today. Many of them still speak Quechua, the language of the Incas. They still weave beautiful textiles with ancient patterns. And the stones remember. The great roads still cross the mountains. And high on its mountain perch, Machu Picchu still greets the rising sun. The Inca Empire may have vanished, but its echo remains, carved forever into the heart of the Andes Mountains. A powerful whisper on the wind,